Hello, everyone, and Happy New Year. Welcome to the very first NLP Insider live show. Thank you so much for joining us. We will be here live every other week for 15 minutes to talk about everything NLP with industry leaders. My name is David Talby. I'm the CTO at Johnson Labs. We build Spark NLP, Spark NLP for healthcare, and Spark OCR. And our job is to provide the open source community and then the healthcare and life science industry with state-of-the-art NLP. To kick off our new series, I'm super excited to welcome as our first guest, Michael Sanky, the global industry lead of healthcare and life sciences at Databricks. Michael, please introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. David, great to see you again. Thanks for having me. I thought you were signing me up to be the musical guest, but I guess I can fill this role as well.
You are the musical guest.
Okay.
But we talked about this, man.
Yeah. So great to be here with everyone today. If you don't know Databricks, we are the data and AI company, leading platform where many healthcare organizations are conducting state-of-the-art NLP, and we have a great partnership with Johnson Labs. So excited to share a little more with you all today about what we're doing.
Great, and thank you for coming. So, today we'll discuss how NLP technology enables you, everyone, to analyze all of your real-world medical text data to improve patient safety and detect adverse drug events, basically bad things that happen to you while you're taking drugs, to improve the safety of new treatments and all of us. So, Mike, I would say as a first question, since you have that broad industry outlook from where you are at Databricks, where are you seeing natural language processing being used in healthcare?
Yeah, honestly, not a day goes by where I'm not in a conversation with a customer or prospect talking about natural language processing. I think, as you know, you live this world. More than 80% of medical data is not structured. And a lot of that is semi-structured text data. And more we're seeing companies across the healthcare ecosystem, whether it's, life sciences companies who are focused on use cases like clinical trial optimization and comparative effectiveness and safety and surveillance, which we'll talk a little more specifically about today. 80% of or whether it's payers who are working with clinical documentation for quality measures and prior authorization reviews and Medicare risk adjustment, or providers who are using natural language processing to drive care delivery and optimize care pathways. We're seeing all these stakeholders start to make use of the semi-structured text data, and they need to stand up scalable natural language processing pipelines. And I think that's why so many of them have found value with the state-of-the-art pre-trained medical libraries that Johnson Labs has, and running those on Databricks platform, which really is optimized, to scale and process it. Really a ton of use cases across the ecosystem that we're seeing. And prior to Databricks, I was leading the real-world data business at Optum, and it was the most valuable, most high-demand asset that we had. It was the unstructured data, because there's so much rich clinical information in there, particularly as you think about some therapeutic areas like oncology and immunology and rare disease that really are dominating both, pharma pipelines as well as medical spend today.
Agreed. Yes, and I would have to say, I think that definitely I'm seeing for the Johnson Lab side as well. I think the Databricks partnership and the ability to apply state-of-the-art models, but in a managed, scalable environment, as Databricks provide, yes, is making it much easier for for teams to really to make projects happen. Absolutely. So, talking about patient safety, just to get us started, what are adverse drug events, and why is it important to detect them?
Yep. So I'll take a half step back maybe from that question, and start with clinical trials. And if you think of clinical trials, biopharma companies are testing for safety, they're testing for efficacy, and then they're typically testing for superiority relative to the standard of care. And in some instances, they're testing for non-inferiority if it's a cheaper therapeutic, or if it's a therapeutic that's more accessible in terms of the delivery mechanism or that sort of thing. So safety is tested extensively in clinical trials. But what happens in the real world is that those populations are larger, they're more diverse, and having comorbid conditions and being on a number of concomitant medications is the norm. So the reality is that despite extensive clinical trials and regulatory reviews on any product that comes to market, there often are patterns that can emerge in the real world due to the nature, again, of it being larger patient populations, more diverse patient populations, and the complexities inherent in comorbidities and concomitant medications, which often are controlled for in that clinical trial setting. So it's critical for biopharma companies to monitor adverse events, which are events that occur when a patient is taking a drug, because these can, having a robust essentially signal detection system can begin to inform whether there actually is an underlying safety event or safety profile of the drug that would require different labeling or additional studies. And these are very large programs, and it requires a lot of resources and a lot of funding, for pharmaceutical organizations. It's not uncommon to spend tens of millions of dollars on a single brand post-launch just to monitor the ongoing safety profile and detect, potential adverse events. So that's a bit of the landscape there. And specifically with adverse events, it's important to recognize that the reporting system doesn't necessarily imply causation, or it certainly doesn't prove anything about causation. These are reports of side effects that happen when individuals are taking a given product. And in aggregate, this is why it's so important to have a robust surveillance system and be able to look across as many data types as possible, because it's in aggregate that you can begin to establish patterns and really understand if there is an underlying safety concern with a given drug. And that's that's where, as natural language processing comes in and is absolutely critical, because it is the technology means of having a scalable drug surveillance system that combs through all kinds of semi-structured data, even phone calls that might happen where there's voice to text transcription coming from things like patient patient call centers and those types of programs that companies are running. So the power of having natural language processing has actually become essential to the drug surveillance program in this country and others.
So how exactly do you see NLP being used to find adverse drug events, more accurately, faster, at a bigger scale?
Yeah. So if you think of, the challenge in finding adverse drug events is in being able to capture them, again, from where the patients are and where the patients are expressing them. So that could happen in social media posts, that could happen in, patient forums, that could happen through patient support programs, that could happen in calls with clinicians and other clinical documentation. So given the way it's typically expressed from the patient, or even when it's the provider, it's in clinical documentation, it's going to be represented the vast majority of the time in narrative data that requires natural language processing to be able to then extract what are those events, and also importantly, are those events connected with the patient taking the medication? Not causation per se, but is it connected with that drug exposure? So you need both the medical libraries, which Johnson Labs offers, to be able to extract the events, to be able to do that entity extraction, and then also have the connection to drug exposure, which is really critical, to make sure that you're accurately representing in this drug surveillance system what's happening.
Yeah, and I agree. The fact that a drug and a symptom exist in a sentence, that does not mean there's an ID, right? So a patient could say, I started taking this drug and I feel fine, right? Or I have no insomnia, right? No issues. Yes,
Yeah.
you need to, exactly.
Yeah, and of course, and you also see things, in clinical documentation where the prescriber may be describing the side effect profile of a drug to a patient, and saying, these drugs carry a side effect profile of migraines, and go down a list of conditions. That's very different than the patient having exposure on the medication. So having that, connection, either from that sort of self-contained documentation, to have the intelligence to recognize drug exposure and adverse event, or from a broader representation of that patient's clinical documentation with the medication, that's absolutely critical, to make sure drug safety is as important of a topic, as you could possibly get. So these are really critical areas, and the deployment of technology is really important here.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, look, and when there are real safety issues, of course, if we can discover them sooner, right? Because we can now do things automatically at a higher scale that benefits all.
Yeah, that's a great point that you just hit on. There were like sort of two things in there. One was discovering them sooner, and the other was around being able to automate it. And those are both critical. I mean, these surveillance programs are in place during clinical trials themselves. So being able to detect any events in that patient population is really important within the trial setting. So in real time, or as near as real time as possible, is critical here. And then being able to automate it, to the greatest extent possible, and have the validity in those results is so important.
Yeah, I agree. Yes, it's the automation. You need the scale, and you need the accuracy as well. Yep. And within NLP, yes, you need to know whether this is an actual description of an adverse event, right? Or you say just a description of something, and then you need to know what are the symptoms, what are the drugs, and see which ones are correlated.
Yeah.
Right, because someone could also say, I started taking Advil, and I'm feeling this, but not that. Right, so you need to know what actually happened. Absolutely. Yep. Any summary words?
No. Well, I mean, as a typical guest, I feel like I'm a talk show guest here, so I'll do a plug for the audience. If you want to go in more detail and more depth here, and actually dig into some notebooks, we'll be running a workshop next week. I think, David, you have some more information on that, but it'll be a week from tomorrow. So hopefully we'll see some of the audience back out at that. And thanks for having me. Great luck with the series. I think it's it'll be interesting. I'll be tuning into the future sessions here.
Thank you. So yes, to your point, yes, Johnson Labs and Databricks are teaming up for a webinar next week on January 19th at noon Eastern or 9 a.m. Pacific time, where we'll show actual code and notebooks on how the Databricks Lakehouse platform and Spark NLP for healthcare enable you to automatically analyze all of your real-world text data to detect adverse events and improve the safety of new treatment. And the link to the registration will be added here in the comments. Other than that, Michael, thank you very much for joining me today. It was super interesting, and I learned something. It was a great way to kick off a new NLP Insider live show. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Take care.
Thank you.